All right. Happy Friday, everybody. Hope you're all excited and prepped for the weekend. Our final guest of the day is Christelle Rohaut, and she is the founder of Cody. The topic today is the future of the workplace. And our tagline is, what's the best workplace model to attract and retain top talent in 2021? And Christelle's bio is that she founded Cody during her master's in city planning at UC Berkeley in 2018. She was also a fellow at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, specialized on the circular economy. Christelle applies her skills as a city planner and entrepreneur to provide an economically and socially beneficial work from home alternative, which we'll certainly learn more about here in just a moment. And this earned her to be honored as a Forbes 30 Under 30 winner in 2020. And her work with Cody has been recognized by Fast Company, the San Francisco Business Times, and other high-profile publications. Her mission goes far beyond just providing space. Cody is a way to revitalize residential neighborhoods by developing strong circular economies. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
All right, well, let's kick off and talk about Cody. So why don't you give just an overview of what Cody is and what you guys provide?
Sure. So Cody is the first company to offer access to daytime workspaces in private homes, giving people the opportunity to walk to work in their own neighborhoods. We typically work directly with companies who embrace flexible work and view Cody as a valuable employee benefit. So the way it works is that we kind of open up work hubs locally in employees' neighborhoods, and it helps the company attract and retain the best talent, and it's part of a remote or hybrid work model.
I studied the website, and I'm really excited about this. We're a fully remote team, and I've thought, I'm sure like everybody else, I've thought a lot lately about the effects of COVID for the remote working world. And I'm curious to get your take on it. We'll do a little bit of a segue here, but I'm curious to hear what you think the future holds in terms of, the companies that were previously in office because of COVID, they went remote. What do you anticipate happening in the next year or two in terms of their workforce and where they work?
I think the data has been very clear after a year of forced remote work. People want flexibility and demand flexibility from their employers. So the companies that are against it or won't provide that flexibility are at risk of losing the best talent and remaining competitive. And so short term, I see a kind of a short term equilibrium where you see more and more companies going hybrid, so making the office optional or mandatory just a couple of days a week. Long term, I think we can dig into those details, but there's a lot of pitfalls to those type of hybrid work models. Long term, I think it's going to be more and more remote first and provide the right benefits for employees to feel as engaged and successful as they can be, regardless of location.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, so let's get into the details of how this works. So let's say that I own a home in the Denver area, and you have companies in this area that need to find places for their staff to work. How does that work from my perspective as a homeowner, and I've got an empty house during the day?
Yeah, so you would go through the application process on our website, share a couple of pictures, what does your home have, kind of coffee, Wi-Fi, etc. And then we have a 18 Cody quality checklist to make sure that, your home is suited for productive work. And then to help you kind of upgrade your home to the standards of an enterprise client, right? So typically it's like Nespresso coffee and a lot of power outlets and self-check-in, these type of things. And it creates a very special experience for enterprise clients.
And then what would it look like for me in terms of, earning an income from this to maybe offset my mortgage?
Yeah, our goal is to cover 30% of your mortgage or your rent. That's kind of the threshold in urban planning for housing affordability, and that's part of our mission. So depending on your location, Denver is a different market than New York, etc.
Sure.
You can make from a few $100s a month to a few $1,000s a month. And that's just daytime sharing of your typically living room, dining room.
I see. Okay. And then typically would there be several people from the same company utilizing my home, or is it more is it generally that they're employees of a company that has operations, say, in Denver, or is it more freelancers, for example, that use the service as well?
We kind of started as a consumer first company 3 years ago. Not with the pandemic, there's a lot more demand on the enterprise side. And so we tend to work directly with companies who have clusters of remote employees. And so you as a homeowner or tenant, you would host typically 3 to 6 employees from the same company who would access your space maybe every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday,
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. And how would this compare to, I guess, what is the sell to the companies in terms of them utilizing this model or what you provide versus renting a commercial space or maybe even sharing a commercial space?
Yeah, so the big difference is that we are the only kind of workspace provider that offers walkable options for employees. The reality is that 99% of Americans live in residential neighborhoods, and so they're not within 1 mile of a downtown office, whether it's shared or private. Co-working spaces tend to be clustered in downtown areas because of zoning. And so if you really want to kind of meet the needs of remote workers who don't want to commute, you have to kind of bring the workplace back to them, like closer to them, and it's in the residential neighborhood. And what do you have? You have a lot of residential spaces, and so that's why we specialize in that, in turning kind of residential space into a work hub for the day, so that we can really cater the needs of remote workers.
That makes sense. And is it more affordable generally to use Coty? Like if I have 6 employees in say New York City, is it going to be on average more affordable for me to use Coty than it would be to get commercial space?
Yeah, we typically save around 60% of real estate costs to our partners.
That's significant.
And also another benefit. So first, the location is everything, right? Like the data is very clear. The number one reason why people don't want to be back in an office is commuting. And with a year of pandemic, a lot of people relocated or bought a house in the suburbs, etc. And so they live even further away than before to the HQ. And so our model is really catered to that first need. But second, compared to a shared co-working space, the company has more control over the experience that the employees have at the local work hub, the local Coty, because it's exclusively privatized to those employees. And so you can recreate that culture and have kombucha or cold brew, whatever like is special to your company that you want to create in terms of amenities. You can do that in a Coty.
I'm a huge cold brew fan. I have a small office within a co-working facility in Boulder, and they have cold brew twice a week. I'm like, I look forward to those 2 days. It's so good.
Well, if you can have that without commuting, wouldn't be the best of
even better. Yeah, even better. Yeah, that's a good point. So where do you guys stand as a company? I know that you're, I think, 3 years old in May, right?
Yeah, that's true.
That's exciting. So where are things at in terms of fundraising? What stage of the business are you at? Kind of catch us up on that part of it.
Yeah, so we are seed stage, preparing for Series A. We raised $7 million so far. As you said, we've been around for 3 years. We started as a more consumer-focused platform in the Bay Area, and then the pandemic kind of shifted the marketplace a little bit towards catering groups of employees from the same company. And now it really accelerated our growth. Remote work has made a leap in the future of 5-10 years with the pandemic. And so now we're growing fast, and we expanded to New York City in the fall 2020. We're expanding in 2021 to new markets within the US and soon in Canada.
That's exciting.
Yeah, that's exciting.
What's the plan for the rest of 2021 in terms of what you're comfortable talking about? What's on the agenda for 2021?
On the agenda is to make Coty accessible to more and more employees and have more and more companies embrace that workplace optionality and provide that basic benefit of providing a productive physical environment. There's a lot of conversation around digital tools to help remote workers, and physical environment tend to be neglected, but I think it's the one-on-one. And so, on the agenda is giving Coty to more and more of those companies and in more states and neighborhoods in the US.
So from a sales perspective, is your focus reaching out to companies that you know have a distributed workforce in different urban areas? I mean, how are you, I guess, going about acquiring your partners?
It's typically the chief people officer or the head of real estate, the head of workplace, who's interested in a different solution, like who's looking into what's the future of the workplace. Am I freezing? No, I'm good.
You're good. You're back. You're back. Yeah.
I'm back. So that's kind of like the person that is the most excited about Coady and can bring that to the rest of the company. Sometimes we have employees themselves who push for Coady internally. And then team by team, you can expand within the company. And then it's typically, or a company between 50 people to like 500 people that has different clusters of remote workers.
Okay, so let's say that I'm a founder of a company in Austin, Texas, and I have 100 employees there that I would like Coady to help me find office space for, and I'm ready to go. So then how do you, like, this next step of finding suitable locations? What's the plan there? How do you go about finding good hosts?
Yeah, that's our magic recipe. I can't share everything, but the way we work with the company is that they give us a list of zip codes so we can map out on an interactive map like exactly where their employees are, and then we tailor the locations according to the highest density of employees in those neighborhoods.
I see.
And then we recommend, like typically people want to spend 2 days at home and 3 days in a Coady, or vice versa. And so we recommend a specific amount of seats in those locations. And there you go. Afterwards, like we can source the locations. Sometimes we already have the host ready to go. It takes a couple of weeks, and within 4 to 6 weeks, we're able to kick off the pilot.
That's great. And what is your day-to-day role at the company?
Well, I'm the co-founder and CEO, so it means a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
My day-to-day role is a little bit of everything, honestly, like working very closely with my team in terms of operations and growth. Also, kind of brand awareness, like what we're doing right now. Obviously, like this is the moment to educate people and to inform them about like there are alternatives to like office or work from home. And, it's the time to be thinking outside of the box. And so that's my role, like, drive the vision, drive the brand awareness above everything else that my team is doing very well without me.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you enjoy the most? Like if you could focus in and pick, and I know that's not realistic for an early stage founder, but what do you enjoy the very most at work?
I love meeting hosts and members. I love just, being in person and dogfooding my own product. I think it's extremely rewarding to like go down the street and knock at a door and magically it opens and it's a Coady. That's wonderful. And then getting to know everyone, getting to know the stories of the host and of the members. It's very exciting to see the impact of what you're doing.
Oh, I'm sure. Do you get some good design inspiration? I'm sure that there's a lot of hosts that have really nice places that are well designed.
Oh yeah, and the best hosts are the designers. You completely got it right. Like they taught us so much, and they're still teaching us like what's the best, kind of work environment in a Coady. We've seen amazing practices and tips from those hosts.
That's great. Yeah, it'd be interesting if you haven't already to maybe develop like a best practice guide for hosts, because there is like I think feng shui, for example, is interesting, and my wife is really good at that. And there's something to that. Like there's something to being in an environment that just feels good, and I find it easier to work in an environment that has good energy like that.
Yeah. Well, I think homes inherently, most of the homes that we have, people spend so much time designing them and so much energy making them nice and cozy because they live there every single day, right?
Sure.
Now, it doesn't mean that it's productive. And that's our job to make them like, a productive space. But compared to commercial space that's kind of cold and doesn't have soul and that vibe that you're looking for, I think residential spaces have really that inherently.
Yeah, definitely a different energy for sure. Yeah. So I'm curious, what would you say is your biggest challenge, or biggest pain point right now as a company?
I think it's just kind of speed of operations. The market is huge. It just exploded. Majority, we went from like, I think it was between 4 and 15% of people were fully remote before the pandemic to we expect like half of employees to stay remote. It's crazy.
Huge. Massive change.
Massive change and at the global scale. So, like sky's the limit. It's just about like, okay, how do we prioritize things we want to do every day so that we can make it available in Boulder, in Denver, in Austin faster,
Yeah. Is there a specific bottleneck that you routinely hit? Something, that challenge that slows you down?
That's a great question. I think there's always kind of a psychological barrier to a new concept like Cody. Initially in the early days, like people were like, Uber is crazy, Airbnb is crazy. I would never sleep in someone else's home and bed. And now look at it.
But I would say, like, wouldn't you agree that like a lot of the foundation and groundwork has been laid by Airbnb, Uber? I mean, if we're going to get in somebody's car and go for a ride, if we're going to stay in a stranger's house, if we're going to let a stranger bring us our food for dinner, like, why can't we go, work during the day in somebody's house? Like, that just seems very normal to me.
Me too. I agree. I think it can be sometimes a generation difference, or some personalities are different.
Sure.
And that's all right. Like, it's not for everybody. But I fully agree. I think once you have the experience, you realize it actually is more special and more elevated than most commercial spaces. But you have kind of, for some people, like you have to experience it to understand it. And that's kind of a barrier, obviously.
Yeah. The educational burden is so significant that it's great. It's great timing for you guys. One, to be able to write off the coattails of these early companies that have sort of set the stage and educated the public on this idea, this sort of sharing economy. And then two, the benefits of I won't say the benefits of COVID, but what COVID has caused in terms of pushing remote work. I mean, the timing couldn't be better for you guys, I imagine.
Yeah, definitely. It's been an upside kind of ride since things reopened. And the thing is that we were around before the pandemic for a year and a half. So I'm grateful that we had that time to like really nail like the experience, the standards, understanding who are our hosts, who are our members. Because now, like, things are opening. The market has exploded, as you said. A lot more people understand the value of what we do, the employee, but also the employer. And now the focus is only about like, okay, let's execute and let's grow as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to prioritization, you alluded to this a little bit earlier, but I'm curious, how do you prioritize your day as a founder?
I think it's about like, how can you have as much impact as possible, right? And if someone else in the company can do it better, like don't do it. That's micromanagement. So because sometimes like they can have a really high impact, right? So that could be top priority in your day, but it shouldn't because somebody else can do it instead of you and do it probably better. So first I'm looking at like, okay, what are the biggest impact stuff that are on the agenda for Cody as a company? And then what is my role to like push them forward, right? And every day I look at kind of those two angles.
So how do you discern then what is the highest and best use of your time versus something that should be handled by a competent team member?
I think it's about like understanding who's responsible for what, right? Like if it's clearly the responsibility of somebody else, like I want to help and I want to voice that I'm here to help and move forward, especially push forward like something, especially if it's top priority. But I don't want to overstep, and it's not my goal neither. Like I think a company is stronger if everyone is empowered and independent instead of kind of a hierarchy. That's very typical in France and way less in the US. And I appreciate that about here.
I see. Well, let's talk about that. This wasn't planned, but I'm curious to know what the business culture and personal culture, but what the business culture is in France and how this might be different. Like if Cody was based in France, how might that look different?
I think it's just a different mentality in terms of top down. Like it's there's less startups, there's less innovation, even though like it's increasing now, but it's new. Where like I'm in San Francisco, I'm in the Bay Area, so I learned a ton from other entrepreneurs that have done that for like 30 years or more. And it's deeply ingrained here, like how things function in terms of transparency, collaboration, communication, and as being vulnerable as well. Like as a CEO, being able to like share the truth and be vulnerable is something that would not be really culturally accepted in France, I think.
I see.
And I think there's a lot of value to that because it builds trust, it brings people together, and we're all part of a bigger mission instead of working for someone. That's something that I really don't want to have in my company and in what we're building together.
I read in your bio that you've been honored as a Forbes 30 Under 30 winner in 2020. And I'm curious, have you ever had any issue with your age being a negative thing? Have you had pushback or feelings of not being respected because of your age? Has that ever been a challenge for you in the startup space?
For sure. Like
really?
I think so. There's always a bias, like especially when you're a first-time founder. And I mean that bias is backed by data, so I can't really push back too much. Like a lot of VCs don't invest in first-time founders because the data shows second-time founders are more successful. That's the reality. What can you say about that? Right?
But you got to get started sometime, right?
Exactly. And I think it's actually very good when you get started right after college because, a lot of really good innovations that were kind of out of the box were founded by very young entrepreneurs. And I think it allows you to be less biased by society or like what you had in other jobs because you kind of come with a very fresh approach and bias kind of.
Yeah. Now tell me, I should probably know this, but I don't recall. Are you the solo founder at Cody, or do you have other co-founders?
I have a co-founder, Dave. He joined me kind of 6 months in. He's the technical co-founder. He does everything I can't do, like coding and techie stuff. Like that's not my thing, and he's great at it.
Now, I'll be careful here, but is he on the older side, or is he a similar age to you?
He's a startup veteran. He did actually several companies that he co-founded himself. So he balanced my experience very well in that regard.
I see. So how is that relationship then? How do you guys work together?
Super simple. Like we all each have our own stuff, and then we meet up like on a regular basis and share what's going on for each of us. And there's really little overlap at the end of the day because he's really technical and I'm really business driven or vision driven, and it works very well.
Yeah, that's great. How did you guys meet?
So at the time I was pitching at Berkeley, last days before graduation, and one angel investor was there and started to get interested and follow my progress. And after a couple of months, she was like, "What do you need? How can I be helpful?" And I said, "Well, I need a technical co-founder."
Okay.
I couldn't build the product myself. I tried on WordPress and stuff, but it was very, very bad. And
I understand that.
And so she introduced us, and it worked out.
Wow, that's so good. I think that it's easy for some to undervalue relationships and connections like that. It's just incredible what can come from those connections and relationships.
Yeah, definitely. And I really enjoy the difference in backgrounds as well. Like we're very different, and that makes us stronger, I think.
I agree. I talked about this this morning, but the idea of always agreeing with your co-founder is not so good, really, because then you're effectively one person. I think it's healthier to have respectful dialogue and actually disagree and work through those things because it points to each of your experience.
Yeah, exactly. I agree.
I want to highlight in on the last line of your bio, and I want to ask you to go a little bit deeper into that. And that says her mission goes far beyond just providing space. Coty is a way to revitalize residential neighborhoods by developing strong circular economies. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that?
Yeah, for sure. So actually, Coty was born more as of a academic thesis almost on our residential neighborhoods. You look around and it's full of houses. There's a pretty well-known housing crisis in the Bay Area, so I was focusing on that at the time. Rents and mortgages are really expensive. People spend most of their time trying to pay it back, but our homes are sitting empty all day long, or at least very underutilized. And that really stuck with me. And I was trying to find a way to like provide additional revenue for those local residents. And at the same time, part of urban planning is that you study also transportation and how people kind of interact with space in the city. In most US cities, it was designed around zoning. So you have large residential zones and tiny commercial zones, and everyone is commuting during the day at 8 a.m. from the residential zones to the downtown area just for Wi-Fi and a desk, right? For those offices. And so the residential zone is empty during the day, and then the commercial zone is empty at night. It just seems so inefficient. That's not how humans function, right? Like we are multi-uses. Like we do different things during the day. What kind of space? Why should a space be frozen in one use, right? And can't like accommodate different uses. And so we started from there. And when you look at like a residential neighborhood, then you're like, okay, there's plenty of real estate that is available that would help benefit the local residents to create, kind of additional earnings. And there's also plenty of workers who need a space to work and, shouldn't have to commute more than half an hour each way for things that are available right next to them. So that's kind of like part of the circular economy, sharing economy, like providing an asset that is right there to somebody else who need it. And another piece of it is like, if you keep people in the neighborhood instead of having that drain by downtown areas, you're going to boost the local economy. The local businesses are going to have more people during the day for lunch, for coffee, etc. And it really creates a virtuous circle. And that's what I love about it. It's transforming our residential neighborhoods where 99% of people live.
Yeah. I'm curious. So when you came to Berkeley, it looks like you have a Master of City Planning and Urban Planning. So did you intend to be entrepreneurial when you started at Berkeley, or did this just kind of work out that way?
I didn't intend. No, I wanted to work for the city. And I think I've always been very kind of innovation driven. Like I was always part of innovation contests and entrepreneurship classes and stuff like that. But no, it was not my intention. It really, as I was studying like all the challenges that cities have, and I was also a fellow on the circular economy at Ellen MacArthur, that's a think tank on these type of concepts. I just started to like really think through that concept of like repurposing a home during the day as a work hub for people who need it in the neighborhood and boosting the local economy that way. And I thought like that's the best way I can be very impactful for cities and for residents. And so I just started to do it. And here we come.
It's a very unique path, which is fun. I'm curious. So, I mean, you're not brand new anymore. You got 3 years of experience under your belt with Coty. How do you like it? I mean, do you foresee that the future Christelle will be an entrepreneur, a founder, or would you rather just work for the city of San Francisco and collect a stable paycheck?
Oh yeah, no. I love entrepreneurship. I'll never work for a company. I think it will always be. I mean, I don't know. I can never say never, right? Like I love collaborating with cities, and we got an award very early in 2018 by the city of Berkeley. It was the Visionary Award or something. So I have like still keep connections with city planning because it's part of our DNA. It's part of why I'm doing this. I think it helps cities for commuting, for CO2 emissions, for local economies, for housing affordability, and I think this is the way I can have as much impact as possible, and that's what I'm passionate about. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs are the same way. They want impact. They want to see the impact of what they're doing like the next day, right?
Yeah.
And it's really hard to have that in the government.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious if you have any regrets, or maybe we could say things that you've learned in the very early stages of Coady that maybe you apply those lessons now, or maybe if you started another venture in the future, you would apply those lessons. And if so, what would those be?
I think the biggest lesson I've learned in the first kind of 2 years is hiring, like finding the right team. I was very lucky with my co-founder very fast, but then I think I made some mistakes in hiring, or even before. Like, it's just I didn't really know what I was looking for. Yeah. And anyone who was passionate, I would be like, yes, join me. Very kind of naive, And I mean, we're building a movement here, right? Like the Walk to Work movement. So it's easy to kind of like mishire, or like not have the right people around you. And I realized at some point that it's actually very key for success. The success is, you can have the best idea ever, but not be able to execute. When you have the best team ever, you can do whatever you want. You can go very far.
Yeah. I've definitely made my fair share of mistakes in hiring. But I've learned from those. And I think that's the key, right? Is learning. And then what's interesting is I knew at the time, I just didn't trust my gut. There were indicators throughout the process that pointed to the fact that, like, this person is just not quite the right fit, or there's certain things that just don't quite make sense. And I, at the time, unfortunately, chose to ignore those feelings that I had. And, it's definitely a valuable lesson learned, for sure.
Yeah. I share similar feelings about that. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm curious, what advice would you give to a founder that's not quite as far down the path that you are? Maybe they're just starting out. What would be your advice to them?
Well, that's like the number one. I would say, trust your guts for finding your founding team. The founding team is everything, and it's more important than what you're actually building. Almost, right?
It's very important. Yeah,
it's key. So number one is like be very thoughtful about the founding team. I would say a tip is look at people who have worked in a similar industry, who have done the job before, so that you can, especially if you're a first-time founder, you can have like hack the learnings a little bit and gain a couple of years of learnings just because you have that person who have those learnings and will execute better. That's something that is great. And then obviously culture fit is number one in understanding, kind of the gut feeling we're talking about. It's also culture fit. Number two, let's see. Not building a product per se too fast, like really validating that there's a need for what you want to do, and that will dictate what you need to build to meet those needs. Yeah,
that's good. Well, so the website is Coady.com, Coady with an I. Where is the best place for people to find you, whether they want to talk to you about Coady or perhaps about being a founder? Where would be the best place for them to reach out?
Yeah, you can reach out. Well, if it's a company who wants to like try Coady, the best way is like on Coady.com. At the bottom, there's a little form, like fill out your information and you'll be directly in contact with my team and myself. And we'll have to like do a little pilot or something. If you want to just contact me directly personally for anything else, LinkedIn or Twitter works well.
Perfect. And the website is beautiful, by the way. So definitely well worth checking out.
Thank you.
Christelle, thank you. It's Friday afternoon. I know that we're all ready for the weekends. I really appreciate you being gracious with your time and joining us today.
Thanks. I had a lot of fun chatting with you, Jim. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. So all the contact information will be on the landing page. So for anybody that wants to check that out further, can certainly do so. But I hope you have a great weekend, Christelle.
Thank you. You too.
Cheers.